Probably the very first thing that we had to work out on the series was the number of animals. What was our cast list? So we needed to look at every scenario and count up the number of dinosaurs, and we ended up with something around about 47 or 50 characters. And they all need to be sculpted. But that's not sculpted in a sort of real world, that's sculpted in the computer.
Our modelers build what we call a proxy model, which is basically getting the model in its early stages of blocking it out, so getting the right shape and proportions.
So what you start off with is just a big grey square block that then you divide up into lots of pixels and all the rest of it, and then start sculpting those things away. And gradually this thing will take the form of a dinosaur.
We then move on to what we call a 3D sculpt to put in detail. It's just the same as clay modelling really, but it's on a computer.
Every little scale, every little detail needs to be sculpted and laid onto the animal.
Having done the sculpt, we then go into something called paint or 3D paint, where you actually paint the colours, the look of them, the patterns.
Just recently, we've started to find evidence of the true colours of some dinosaurs. But for the most part, the colours, patterns are educated guesses.
In order for the animators to be able to move the dinosaurs, the models then get passed on to a rigging team who then put in puppeteering controls which enable the animators to animate. Those puppeteers are really like skeletons that go inside the dinosaurs.
Everything needs to be rigged. If you want an eyelid, that needs rigging. If you need a nostril flare, that needs rigging. So all the kind of nuanced movement you've described in your script or you've asked for, that needs to be put in at the rigging stage, because without that, well, it isn't going to move. The first thing is we write the scenario. We need to know exactly what the animals are and kind of broadly what's going to happen. So everything needs to be plotted out before we can begin to do anything. And then it goes to the storyboard artist.
Those storyboards then go into an edit suite where we cut them up and we put them in a timeline and do something which we call an animatic, where all the pictures are roughly timed out correctly.
That gives you a kind of skeleton and give you a broad idea of how long the scenes and kind of the shots are going to last. But the critical stage is the next stage, which is the previs. Previs is where the choreography of both the dinosaurs and what they're doing and the camera movements are all plotted out. And it's where most directing happens.
You're effectively deciding, okay, the action is going to be played like this, and you're getting that basic choreography right. And it's a pretty good way of actually saying, is this sequence going to work?
Once you've committed to your camera position, that is it. So that positioning of cameras and choreography is crucial to everything else that follows. Then it goes to animation. Animation is the phase where the character of the animal is kind of suddenly breathed life into. So how it moves, how it sort of swings around, how it reacts, and those subtle nuanced things that make it sort of feel like more like a character are done.
They're just animating the dinosaurs and getting the action and the movements and the biomechanics to feel natural, organic, believable, dynamic. That's all done by the animators.
To be able to take that process and see it and understand how it's going to look when you're tweaking and pushing and pulling all these different little nodes is pretty extraordinary. When you're talking about making a series that's entirely CGI, the look of it is pretty important. We don't want our world to look exactly the same as the world we're in now, just with dinosaurs in. We want it to feel like, yes, this is planet Earth, but it's a very different planet Earth the way you understand it. So we wanted to arrive at something that felt stylistic without feeling unreal.
Absolutely everything we do has to be made from scratch. Nothing is there for free. We're not just taking pictures and putting them together, we're generating everything.
We had to decide, okay, what are the plans? What does it look like? How is it going to look? Because if you don't prescribe it, nothing will be there. You've got to invent these worlds. And we do a kind of a rough sketch of how we kind of want it to look. And then we'd send it to an artist, and they would paint up these backplates. That sets the kind of colours, the tone, the weather, the time of day. So they're critical to actually the look of the scenes. It's a very tricky balance, and that's where the lighting needs to come in.
The lighting team take in environment stuff like plants, rocks, trees, anything that's out there in the world in order to create the foreground elements in which these dinosaurs live. And there's an awful lot of work that obviously goes into doing that. They then get passed on to the compositors, who are the people who take all the layers that are generated from the lighters. They then put in the backdrops, the matte paintings that have been created, and make everything sit together. So they're creating the atmosphere, they're finishing the shots.
It's a very strange art of trying to understand what makes something work and what doesn't, but you just try to load the dice in your favour of all the cues, all the signals that you're sort of taking in when you're looking at this, feel consistent with a kind of how you understand the world.
After the compositing, there's also then the layers which make a lot of difference. The dust kick up from the dinosaur's foot, the bits of blood, the water, the splashes, all those things then need to be added as well to make it feel more immersive and visceral and real.
And that is the real nuance, I think, of compositing and lighting. To get that right, to sell the world and understand what can work and what can't work. When I sort of started talking with the creative director here at Jellyfish, we sort of thought there's no way we can get a whole hour out of CGI, but we could potentially manage 2/3 of that time if we're very smart about how we actually address the process. So that leaves us with 1/3 of what we didn't really know. But as we sort of went on, we thought, actually there's an opportunity here to actually make a program that addresses some of the issues that Walking with Dinosaurs had, which is the perennial, how do they know that? Well, actually, a paleontological dig site is a bit like a crime scene, so trying to do a kind of a crime scene analysis as much as we can. The idea was to bring up photographs and bring up images of the fossil, of what the dinosaur looked like, of the dig, just bits of kind of the process of paleontology. How do you integrate the factual and the dramatic? I mean, I think this is often a bit of a kind of a hot potato, and often it can just fall foul. So we needed to find a way that both of them served one another, as it were. So we needed to make sure the exposition would feed the drama, and the drama would feed the next bit of exposition. But if we can use that to show the paleontology in a sort of real and meaningful way, people can hopefully engage better with the drama, knowing that this is based on the best evidence. As soon as the BBC decides to do a new dinosaur programme, it probably takes a matter of sort of a millisecond or maybe a second before people start thinking of Walking with Dinosaurs. It's 11 years since it was shown, but it was such an iconic program that we need to kind of take stock and think, well, what have we learned from it? What can we take from it? And what can we sort of like adapt and improve upon? One of the constraints at the time was shooting backplates. So which means you're kind of placing the camera down and allowing the movement to essentially play out. You tended to have a number of shots that were quite languid, and they'd be sitting there. The dinosaurs perform, in essence, in a stage. And the thing that we wanted to make sure that this series was out was make it much more subjective, to make it much more immersive. And the way to do that, we felt, was to actually move the camera a lot more and get it more dynamic. Now, the only way we could do that was actually to make it entirely CGI. Throw the camera here, then throw it over here. You can change your camera positions and perspectives more often and more dynamically, taking the same devices that exist in almost any drama, but applying them to dinosaurs. But because we don't have any dialogue, what it essentially meant is it's all through action. So our cut rate now is that much higher. Each shot, on average, is something like 2.5 seconds. And that's what we wanted this program to be. We wanted to make it much, much more subjective, much more visceral, much more kind of dramatic and in your face. As to how we structured the series, we decided to divide it up into a series of scenarios, sort of small, self-contained scenes, that then would bolt together to produce a half hour. Now with CGI, you can make anything happen, but of course, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to just sort of like make anything up and have, kung fu dinosaurs or whatever it is. It needs to be based on things that are reasonable. So our first point was to cast our net wide. You end up collating all these papers. Some of them suggest themselves straight away. You've got a bone with a particular bite mark that tells you a story. Everything's there and you think, well, that's the cornerstone of the scenario, that bone. It's a mystery, what bit it? You realise dinosaur behaviours, or preserved dinosaur behaviours, are very rare. And yet that is the thing that the scenarios need more than anything else. Something that tells you something interesting, something that tells you a little bit of insight into how dinosaurs lived and died. So you start looking at natural history scenarios as well and thinking, is that reasonable to take that behaviour and graft it onto a dinosaur? And that's where you're into a kind of an area that's sort of slightly greyer, but nonetheless, as long as you kind of feel it's viable, justifiable, then we kind of felt, well, that's a reasonable behaviour because it's a fundamental instinct. So what you end up with is a kind of fruit cocktail of evidence. Some of it from the dinosaur behavioural evidence, preferably. Some of it from natural history scenarios that you feel appropriate to graft onto certain behaviours. Something that feels like, yes, this is reasonable, this could have happened. But it all needs to be based on the best evidence.
What we wanted to do in this series was make the audience feel really part of it, actually immerse them and get them up close and personal. And to do that, it meant recreating the entire world, the entire backgrounds, the dinosaurs, everything was going to be created in the computer. Sound is really important because it gives an emotional context for the animals. So it's got to feel relevant, and it has to feel that it kind of fits the animal. So you're looking around the natural world as it stands, and you're looking for certain kind of consistent rules that you can apply to the dinosaurs. The bigger an animal is, the more bass its sounds likely to be. And the more other sounds that are going on. If you've got a 75-ton herbivore that's how it basically digests its food the whole time, it's going to have a lot of kind of rumblings going on. It's going to have kind of perpetual indigestion. But there are very kind of good ways of actually getting it accurate. So once you've got your skeleton and your muscle mass, then you need to throw it in a skin. And we actually have good evidence now of a lot of groups of dinosaurs' skin texture. They've been found preserved in fine sediments and stuff. But recently, in 2010, for the first time, we actually could identify the true colour of dinosaurs. Scientists found feathers on these feathered dinosaurs, and they were so well preserved they could actually see the structure of cells that contained the pigment. And by comparing these cells to modern bird cells, they were able to work out what colour these feathers would have been. More species of dinosaurs have been uncovered in the last 10 or so years than in the preceding 200. So there's a real new understanding of dinosaurs. There is a fascination that these lived and breathed and killed in the same world that we're living in. What this series, I think, gives us is a kind of a global perspective. For the first time now, we've got a kind of a good global view of dinosaurs. Previously, we were restricted to North America broadly and Europe. But now South America, Africa, Madagascar, India, China have all had incredible discoveries in the last few years. So I think we can get a good global perspective of dinosaurs for the first time.